healthcare, is it?
Oh my goodness, no. We certainly have not gone unnoticed. There are hospitals throughout Asia, throughout India.
India wants to become the world leader in medical tourism and might just make it. Alongside the familiar images of the country, teeming, dusty streets, poverty, you can add a gleaming new private hospital. This hospital opened only 7 weeks before we got there. It was already expanding. The hospital boom in India was fueled by India's growing middle class who demanded access to quality health care. Now the country known for exporting doctors is trying hard to import patients. The most important player is the Apollo Group, the largest hospital group in India, third largest in the world. Anjali Kapoor Bissell is a director of Apollo's International Patient Office.
Why is it important to get foreign patients here?
It makes sense to establish India as sort of like the world destination for healthcare.
That's the ambition, that India should become the world
destination for healthcare, that's right.
But why should foreigners come here? Well, it's even cheaper than Thailand for most procedures, with prices about 10% what they would be in the U.S. Anne Bell works at the British High Commission in New Delhi. She just had a baby and says she's glad she was here and not in England.
There's been no pressure to go home after the delivery. We've been welcome to stay as long as we want. They're looking after the baby, they're looking after me, giving me enough time to get settled and confident enough to go back home. Often in the UK, you might be out of the hospital within 5 hours if you've had a normal delivery.
And in the UK, she wouldn't have had a private room with a private bath. Not to mention massages, yoga too. And the doctors? Indian doctors are known worldwide. They speak English, and they're often the very same doctors you may have had in Europe or America, where many of them practiced before returning to India.
Do you find that many Indian doctors are coming back now because of hospitals such as this one?
Yes, a large number are coming back because they have something to come back to.
Dr. Praveen Kilnani, a pediatric intensive care specialist, worked at several American hospitals, including Mass General. Dr. Vikas Kohli is a pediatric cardiologist who worked at hospitals in New York and Miami. Both need sophisticated equipment to care for their patients, something India didn't have before the birth of private hospitals like Apollo. They both wanted to come back to India, despite the fact that medical care costs much less here, partly because doctors make much less.
How much less do you make here than you made in the States?
Maybe the 10th or 20th of
Absolutely.
What we were making in the U.S.
They wanted to come back, they say, because they felt their expertise was needed here in India much more than in America.
There are probably 1,500 to 2,000 pediatric cardiologists in US. I would be one of them. In India, there were just 4 of us. I was very passionate about working for Indian kids.
And since there are so many Indians who require the kind of care only you can offer, why is there such a strong drive to attract foreign patients?
Who doesn't mind extra money flowing?
Stephanie Settlemeyer didn't want to spend the tens of thousands it would have cost her for the hip surgery she needed, and she didn't have insurance. So with her daughter by her side, she flew from Vero Beach, Florida, to the Apollo Hospital in Chennai. She'd never been to India before, but she already knew quite a bit about Indian doctors.
My doctor actually in Vero Beach, she's an Indian doctor. So why not go where they come from?
When you took this decision to come to India for surgery, did your friends back in Florida say, "Are you crazy?"
All of them. Hardly anybody said, "Oh, great idea."
But she didn't come here just to save money. She came for an operation she couldn't get at home. It's called hip resurfacing, and it's changed people's lives. It hasn't been approved yet by the FDA, but in India, Dr. Vijay Bose has performed over 300 of them. He showed us the difference between a hip resurfacing and hip replacement, which is the standard operation performed in the United States. He said his patients usually recover faster because his procedure is far less radical and doesn't involve cutting the thigh bone.
Now that's a model of a pelvis, and that's the femur or thigh bone as we call it, and that's the hip joint. And hip replacement, unfortunately, this bone has to be chopped off.
Instead, Bose fits a metal cap over the end, which fits into a metal socket in the hip. The result, he says, is that patients end up with enough mobility to do virtually anything.
Patients, play football, basketball, whatever you want, not a problem.
Right crutch, then the left leg.
Until the FDA approves it, the only way to have this operation in the U.S. is by getting into a clinical trial. But be warned, it isn't cheap.
How much does it cost in the States?
I believe it costs something from $28,000 to $32,000 US dollars.
Between $28,000 and $32,000.
That's correct.
And here, what did it cost you?
$5,800.
Including food, service, nurses, the works.
Private nurse after surgery. And feeling always that they were just totally attentive. If you rang the bell next to your bed, boop, somebody was there immediately.
Sound too good to be true? Don't forget, it's at least a 20-hour trip. There is malaria in parts of India. Patients have complained of intestinal disorders, and if something goes wrong, you could end up suing for malpractice in an Indian court.
And one could only wish you the best of luck. But Stephanie Settlemeyer feels she's already had more luck than she had any right to expect. By the time we left India, she was into the tourism part of her treatment, convalescing at a seaside resort an hour's drive from the hospital.
Is this standard that when somebody gets surgery at a hospital here, they'll come to a resort like this afterwards?
Yeah, they suggest it.
This, too, is not very expensive, is it?
$140 a day.
For you and your daughter?
For myself and my daughter, including an enormous, fabulous breakfast that they serve until 10:30.
I think a lot of people seeing you sitting here in what's usually called post-op and hearing your tales of what the op was like, are going to start thinking about India.
Yeah, and combining surgery and paradise.